Is it true that cashiers in the USA do not have chairs? Yes, and it has been a source of tension between me and various employers over the years. As people outside the US have discovered, cashiering can be done efficiently from a sitting position, if you simply design the space around them for sitting. But the US has this weird, uber-capitalist mentality that, if you're sitting, you're not working. Minimum wage employees are not allowed to be people. We're not allowed to be tired, disabled, cranky, distracted, or anything other than cheerful and busy at all times. We're not even allowed to be merely polite. This is the mentality that caused Prince Don, the phony emperor of the US, to fire the pandemic response team. He got rid of it because there wasn't a pandemic at that moment, so he didn't see any reason to pay them to stand around not doing anything. He didn't understand that part of what they were being paid for was the preparation for when they would be most active, and the ability to kick right into high gear because they were already in place along with their continued and ongoing prep work. I have a knee injury. I can do a lot of things, but standing and walking back and forth on tile floor for 6 hours a day aggravates my knee. When my job legitimately requires me to stand still, I can do everything from a seated position on a bar stool just as well as standing. So when I first got hired, I asked for a stool. They told me that the company made a corporate decision to remove the stools shortly before I was hired. So I went up the chain to corporate to point out that the state statutes actually required them to provide me with a stool as part of the Reasonable Accommodations Clause of the Americans with Disabilities Act. So they contacted my store manager and told him to get me a stool. I was trying to get stools for all the cashiers. I am not a cashier, but my job requires me to stand at a counter in the back of the store too, but only I got the stool because I was the one who complained. About 2 years later, several of the cashiers suffered acute foot injuries, one right after the other. Every time I came into work, my stool was being used by someone else. Since they had a foot in a cast, or were kneeling on one of those little wheeled scooter things to get around, I didn't complain because I figured they needed my stool more than I did. But I shouldn't have had to share my stool. Eventually, my stool disappeared. Nobody seemed to know where it went. It was just gone. The rumor was that the latest cashier in a cast was somehow abusing the privilege of the stool and sitting when management didn't want her to sit. Since they knew they couldn't actually punish her for it, the stool just quietly disappeared one day. This happened right at the same time that I was in a major car accident and suffered second-degree burns on my right arm and knocked out my right knee. So when I came back to work after the accident, wearing a knee brace and limping, my stool was gone. I asked everyone where my stool was for 3 months. I asked if they couldn't find my stool, could they get me a new one? The managers all said that none of them had the authority to do it except this one manager, and he always said, "Oh, is that still missing? Sure, no problem," and then never did. Then the quarantine happened. Our store is considered essential, so we're still open, but we're limiting people to just 10 people in the store at one time, including the employees. So now someone has to sit at the door to guard it and prevent people from coming in, and to open the door to let people out. Suddenly, my stool is back. Nobody knows where it came from. Nobody will admit to having found it. It just showed up the very day we created a job position where someone has to stand at the door for the entire time the store is open. And it showed up all dusty and dirty too, like it had been shoved in the back of the stock room or our storage container outside. This is the mentality of American managers and employers. If you're not moving, you're not working, and if you're not working, why should you get paid? Disability? Injury? If you can't do the job in the exact same way that someone without your disability can, then you can't do the job and we don't want to pay you. Just look at all the memes going around right now saying things like, now we see that all those jobs that couldn't be done from home can suddenly be done from home. We have to do our jobs the inefficient way and or the way the previous generation did it, or else we're lazy and therefore don't deserve to have the job. American capitalists have this slogan they like to repeat, work smarter, not harder. But they don't actually mean it. They mean it for themselves, but they don't mean it for their employees and workers. Getting paid to sit on your ass is only acceptable for billionaires who inherited their money and real estate and businesses. Everyone else has to stand. Edit, I don't need advice on how to address my example. I did not give all the details, I gave the relevant details. I know my situation better than you do.